Prince Andrew's accuser has just given an interview to Britain's BBC. Victoria GIUFFRE detailed her claim that she was pimped out to the Prince 3 times by his friend, billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, later convicted of pedophilia, and was even flown to London when she was 17 to sleep with him.
He asked me to dance. He is the most hideous dancer I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was horrible, and this guy was sweating all over me. Like, his sweat was like, it was raining basically everywhere, and I was just like, whoa, grossed out from it. But I knew I had to keep him happy because that's what Jeffrey and Ghislaine would expect from me.
That stuff about the sweat is in direct contradiction of this earlier defence by the Prince.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time.
But the internet has buzzed since with pictures of Prince Andrew sweating plenty back then. And GIUFFRE says she's had enough of his denials.
People on the inside are going to keep coming up with these ridiculous excuses, like his arm was elongated, or the photo was doctored, or he came to New York to break up with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, come on. I'm calling BS on this, because that's what it is.
And Prince Andrew is still not given a credible defence, a credible alibi against this claim, which GIUFFRE repeated to the BBC today, that he slept with her when she was just 17.
It didn't last very long, the whole entire procedure. It was disgusting. He wasn't mean or anything, but he got up and he said thanks and walked out, and I sat there in bed just horrified and ashamed. It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of a royal family.
Now, to repeat, the Prince strongly denies sleeping with GIUFFRE. He's denied it again after this interview. And there is also no proof that he actually did sleep with her. Joining me to discuss this is Professor David Flint, a long-time legal academic and the national convener of Australians for Constitutional Monarchy. David, it's great to catch up with you again. How do you sum up the case against Prince Andrew?
Well, I think that we cannot assume guilt by accusation. And in this case, the complainant, the alleged victim, has herself had a rather strange background because of her similar claims of 7 instances of sexual intercourse with Alan Dershowitz, the famous American attorney, the lawyer. And he sued her lawyers, and there was a settlement out of court, and he says that her lawyers have admitted that it would have been impossible on any of those 7 occasions, because of his detailed records, for him to have committed the offence. He says he did not know her, never met her, had no relationship with her, and he says that the claims are completely unfounded, and also he says that her claims about her age are wrong, and that she is in fact older than she claims she was at the time of the alleged number of offences. Now, that was settled out of court, and there's a defamation case going on between them. I think he's counter-suing. But I think it's pretty clear that her credibility is an issue. I'm not saying that she is not a credible witness, but it is an issue. And I would have hoped that the BBC in their interview at least asked questions about that. Otherwise, the BBC obviously has an agenda in this matter.
But it also has a photograph which didn't exist in the case of Dershowitz, so it's a question too of how do you explain that? How do you explain the flight records that have him and her on 3 occasions, at least in proximity around the globe, if not in the same room? There is a little bit more circumstantial evidence in this case.
No doubt there are photographs of you and me with all sorts of people whom we didn't know or are surprised to be photographed with. And the mere existence of a photograph with a person is not proof of anything, and he is not guilty by accusation. We go back to the Magna Carta for that principle, notwithstanding attempts to undermine it. And obviously there's a media pack circling to get the Prince, and even in Australia has triggered off claims that this should be the basis for becoming a republic, which is a ridiculous proposition.
I'll ask you about that in a second, but what you've mentioned the Dershowitz case, right? So here's Alan Dershowitz, who I must say can write his own legal advice, which is very handy in a legal fight. So he can not run up the costs that the person is suing does. So we must also put that there. But what he at least managed to stop it is said what you've said. What must Prince Andrew do now to end this? Because I think his defences so far have been extremely lacking in detail and not much energy in actually disproving very damaging allegations.
There is absolutely no onus on the Prince to defend, to prove anything, because there's no legal action against him. There's certainly no criminal action against him, and if there's a civil action, that's a different matter. You have to remember that when there are civil actions in this matter, those are actions principally against the Epstein estate, which is magnificently rich. And there will be a lot of plaintiffs about that. And you also have to take into account the American legal system and not take too much notice of interviews with American lawyers on television, because American lawyers do what I was taught at law school was highly improper. That is, they take a percentage of anything they get. And also the American legal system ensures that those who take all manner of actions do not bear any responsibility for that, because costs are never awarded in civil cases against a losing plaintiff. So the system is very much stacked against those who are defending these matters, and the principal source, the principal action is essentially against the Epstein estate, and these other matters are theatre which are there to support actions against the Epstein estate.
David Flint, it's been great to talk to you. We've had so much on one side of the argument here. I'm glad that you've been able to put an alternative view, and we'll just see how it all washes out. I think it's important to hear both sides of the debate, and you've put some very strong points. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, Andrew.